The Zarkari warship, Seraphis, moved through deep space. Its massive black hull reflected the light of a dying star. The ship was built for war, covered in heavy armor, advanced plasma cannons, and a shield strong enough to survive a meteor storm. Inside the command deck, Admiral Vekrath stood tall. His glowing red eyes scanned the screens in front of him. His warriors, all elite Zarkari soldiers, worked at their stations. Their sharp claws tapped on the controls, monitoring every part of space. Zarkari Empire ruled this sector of the galaxy. They were strong, feared, and undefeated. They had fought and crushed many alien species, and humans, they were weak, primitive creatures. That's what the Zarkari believed. But then, something changed. "Admiral, we are detecting a disturbance," said a Zarkari officer, his voice filled with concern. Vekrath turned. "A disturbance?" "Yes, sir," the officer replied. "Something is in our sector, but the scanners cannot identify it." The Admiral narrowed his eyes. "Show me." A holographic screen lit up. The sensors had detected a shadow in space, something moving fast, but without a clear signal. At first, it looked like an asteroid, drifting silently. But its movement was too precise, too controlled. Vekrath's cold expression turned into a frown. He had seen many battles, fought many wars. This was no asteroid. "This is a ship," he muttered. The bridge fell silent. The officers stared at him, confused. "But sir," one officer said, "no known ships use this kind of stealth technology." Vekrath's grip on the console tightened. He could feel it. Something dangerous was out there. His instincts screamed at him. This was not a mistake. "Activate long-range scanners," he ordered, "and bring the weapons online." The Zarkari officers obeyed. The warship's guns hummed as they powered up. The shields activated, surrounding the ship in an energy barrier. Then, everything changed. A sudden alert flashed on the screen. Something was approaching fast. And then, without warning, it appeared. A massive human warship emerged from the darkness. Its dark gray hull was sleek, sharp, built for speed and power. The ship had a name written on its side. SS Warhammer. Vekrath's eyes widened. A human warship. "This is impossible," one officer gasped. "Humans don't have warships like this." But reality was right in front of them. The humans had arrived. And they were hunting. The Warhammer didn't waste time. It opened fire. Bright blue energy beams shot across space. They hit Seraphis' shields with massive force, causing the whole ship to shake. Sparks flew inside the control room. Officers grabbed onto their seats, shields holding at 78%. An officer reported. Vekrath growled. "Fire back. Destroy them." Seraphis' massive cannons turned toward the Warhammer. A deep hum filled the ship as plasma torpedoes launched toward the human warship. The Warhammer dodged with incredible speed. It twisted, moved sideways, and slipped between the blasts like a predator avoiding its prey's attack. Vekrath clenched his fists. How are they so fast? The humans fired again. This time, they hit a weak spot near the Zarkari engines. The explosion sent a shockwave through Seraphis. "Damage in Sector 5. An officer shouted. "We are losing power in the left thrusters." The Admiral's mind raced. This was not how battles usually went. The Zarkari were the strongest. They were supposed to be the hunters. But now, they were the prey. And the worst part, the humans weren't just attacking. They were toying with them. Vekrath gritted his teeth. No, he would not run. He would not be defeated. "Prepare for full counterattack," he ordered. "We will end them here." But deep inside, for the first time in his life, he felt fear. Because the humans were not just fighting back. They were winning. Alarms blared inside the Zarkari warship, Seraphis. Red lights flashed across the control deck, and officers shouted commands. The ship had never been in this much danger before. Admiral Veckrath stood tall, his sharp claws digging into the metal console. His glowing red eyes locked onto the enemy warship outside the window. SS Warhammer. A human warship. A ship that should not exist. This is impossible, Veckrath growled. Humans cannot be this strong. Yet the truth was right in front of him. The Warhammer had already damaged his ship, and it was still attacking. Admiral, our left thruster is offline, a Zarkari officer reported. We are losing mobility. Veckrath slammed his fist onto the console. Fire all weapons. Destroy them. The Exarithis unleashed its plasma cannons and torpedoes. Giant red energy bolts shot across space, heading straight for the Warhammer. But then, something unexpected happened. The human warship moved. And not just moved. It dodged the attacks with unbelievable speed. The ship twisted, turned, and slipped between the blasts like a predator avoiding its prey's desperate attacks. Veckrath's claws tightened. How is this possible? Humans were supposed to be slow, weak, predictable. Their ships were supposed to be old and outdated. But this warship, this was different. Then, the Warhammer attacked again. Its front cannons glowed bright blue. A second later, a powerful energy beam fired directly at Exarithis' shields. Boom! The Zarkari warship shook violently. Sparks exploded from the walls. Officers fell from their seats. Shields down to 42%. An officer shouted, "Another hit like that, and we won't survive." Veckrath's heart pounded. This was not just an attack. This was a hunt. The humans had set a trap, and the Exarithis had walked straight into it. Inside the Warhammer, Commander Adrian Wolf watched the enemy ship shake under his attack. His sharp eyes studied every detail on the holographic screen. Direct hit, his weapons officer reported. Zarkari shields are almost down. Wolf nodded. Good. Keep up the pressure. Don't let them escape. For years, humans had lived under the shadow of the Zarkari Empire. The aliens had treated them like insects, weak and powerless. But those days were over. This was revenge. Wolf turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kaldorn. The soldier stood tall, his black armor shining under the dim lights of the command deck. "They will call for reinforcements," Dorn said. "We don't have much time." Wolf smirked. "We don't need much time." He raised his voice. "Prepare for Phase 2. Back on the Zarkari warship. The bridge was in chaos. The Zarkari officers struggled to keep the ship under control. "Admiral, we must retreat," an officer said. "We cannot win this battle." Veckrath's sharp teeth clenched. Retreat. The Zarkari Empire never retreated. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The humans were winning. Suddenly, the ship's scanners beeped again. A second human warship appeared from the darkness. Veckrath's eyes widened. Another one. This one was smaller but faster. It moved like a shadow, slipping past the Exarithis defense systems. And then, it fired. A direct hit on the engine bay. The entire Zarkari warship trembled. Inside the Warhammer. "Nice shot," Wolf said, watching the explosion on the enemy ship. The second human warship, SS Revenant, had arrived right on time. The plan was working perfectly. Wolf leaned forward. "Send the message." A transmission was sent directly to the enemy warship. A simple message flashed on their screen. "You invaded our world. Now it's our turn. Back on the Zarkari warship." Veckrath read the message. His blood turned cold. These humans, they were not just surviving. They were hunting. And they were not going to stop. For the first time in his life, Admiral Veckrath felt something he had never felt before. Fear. The Zarkari warship, Serethis, was in trouble. Deep space was silent, but inside the warship, alarms screamed. Sparks flew from broken control panels, and thick smoke filled parts of the bridge. Officers ran to their stations, trying to restore control. Admiral Veckrath stood firm in the chaos, his red eyes glowing with fury. He could not believe what was happening. A human warship, SS Warhammer, had crippled his ship, and now another one, SS Revenant, had joined the attack. Humans winning a space battle against the Zarkari Empire. Unthinkable. Status report. Vec Wrath barked. An officer, barely standing, checked the controls. His voice shook. Admiral, left engine completely offline. Shields down to 19%. We are losing power. Vec Wrath's claws tightened. No, this cannot be. The Zarkari Empire was the strongest in the galaxy. They had conquered entire civilizations. They had crushed enemy fleets. And yet, here they were, trapped, damaged, and under attack. By humans. Inside the Warhammer, Commander Adrian Wolf watched the burning enemy ship on the main screen. His soldiers stood behind him, waiting for his next command. Wolf smirked. They still think they can win. Lieutenant Cal Dorn nodded. They won't surrender. Wolf chuckled. Of course not. The Zarkari think they're invincible. But they weren't. Not anymore. Wolf turned to his crew. Target their weapons. Let's finish this. The final mistake. On the Exarithus, Admiral Vec Wrath straightened his back. His mind was racing. He needed a plan. Fast. This is not over, he growled. We still have weapons. Prepare for a full counterattack. The remaining Zarkari gunners locked on to the Warhammer. Giant plasma cannons charged, glowing bright red. Torpedo launchers activated, ready to fire. Vec Wrath's eyes narrowed. If he could just land one good hit, he cooled. Boom! A massive explosion rocked the Exarithus. The control room shook violently. Officers fell to the ground. Vec Wrath grabbed onto the console, his eyes wide. What happened? He roared. An officer coughed through the smoke. His voice was weak. Sir, the humans. They hit our primary reactor. Vec Wrath's blood turned cold. The primary reactor. The heart of the warship. He turned to the screen. There, in the vastness of space, he saw it. The Warhammer was still firing. Another round of railgun blasts tore through the ship's hull. The powerful energy cannons from the Revenant struck next, piercing deep into the structure. Vec Wrath's mind screamed in denial. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. Another officer shouted in panic. Admiral, the ship cannot hold much longer. Vec Wrath's sharp teeth clenched. For the first time in his life, he knew. This was the end. Inside the Warhammer, victory. Commander Wolf watched as the Exarithus burned. The enemy ship's hull was cracking. Pieces of metal floated away into space. It was over. Lieutenant Dorn folded his arms. They're finished. Wolf exhaled. Not yet. He pressed a button on his command console. All ships, prepare for the final strike. The Warhammer's railguns charged one last time. The Revenant launched a final torpedo. The glowing projectiles raced toward the enemy ship, the end of the Exarithus. Vec Wrath stared at the incoming fire. He refused to believe this was happening. The Zarkari Empire does not lose. The Zarkari Empire does not bow. But at this moment, he saw the truth. The humans were not weak. They were hunters, and he was the prey. The final shot struck the core of the ship. A second later, the Exarithus exploded. A massive fireball erupted in the dark emptiness of space. The shockwave spread out, sending debris in all directions. The mighty Zarkari warship was gone. The war has truly begun. Inside the Warhammer, a silence fell over the crew. The battle was won. Lieutenant Dorn finally spoke. First Zarkari warship destroyed. In history. Commander Wolf took a deep breath. And it won't be the last. The Warhammer and Revenant turned, their engines glowing blue as they prepared to leave. The battle was over. But the war had just begun. The Exarithus was gone. Its wreckage floated in the cold void of space. Burning metal fragments drifted away, disappearing into the darkness. The once mighty Zarkari warship had been reduced to nothing. And the ones responsible, humans. For the first time in history, a human fleet had defeated and destroyed a Zarkari warship. The impossible had happened, but the war was far from over. Inside the Warhammer, Commander Adrian Wolf leaned back in his chair, watching the battlefield. The Warhammer and the Revenant had won, but there was no time to celebrate. "They will come for revenge," Lieutenant Caldorn said, arms crossed. Wolf nodded. "Yes, and they'll come with everything they have." Destroying the Exerithus was a message to the entire Zarkari Empire. Humans were not prey anymore. They were predators. Wolf turned to his officers. "We move now, before reinforcements arrive." Engines roared to life as both ships powered up. The blue glow of their thrusters lit the darkness. They had to disappear before the Zarkari fleet arrived. Zarkari High Command. The Emperor's Wrath. Deep inside the Zarkari homeworld, in the heart of their empire, a massive fortress stood tall. It was known as the Obsidian Throne, the center of Zarkari power. Inside, the air was thick with tension. A massive figure stood in front of a holographic screen, his claws twitching in anger. His sharp fangs gleamed under the dim red light. This was Emperor Xalrath, ruler of the Zarkari Empire, and he had just received the most unthinkable news. A human warship had destroyed the Exerithus. A human fleet had defeated a Zarkari warship in battle. Unacceptable. Unforgivable. The Emperor turned to his war council. "Tell me this is a lie." The generals looked at each other. No one spoke. They knew the truth. Xalrath's claws dug into the metal table. "You mean to tell me that a species of farmers, miners, and traders destroyed one of my warships?" One of the generals took a shaky breath. "Yes, my lord." The Emperor's eyes burned with rage. "Then the humans have made their choice." The room was silent. Xalrath's voice was low and dangerous. "They have declared war. The hunt begins." The Zarkari were not just warriors. They were hunters, conquerors, destroyers. And now, their pride was wounded. Across the Zarkari Empire, warships powered up. Hundreds of battlecruisers, dreadnoughts, and fighter squadrons were mobilizing. They were preparing for something the humans had never seen before: a full-scale counterattack. The hunt for the Warhammer and Revenant had begun. The humans had drawn first blood. But now, the Zarkari were coming. Inside the Revenant, a dangerous escape. Captain Alina Vasquez piloted the Revenant through an asteroid field. The ship's engines roared as it weaved between giant rocks, barely avoiding collisions. "Keep moving." Wolf's voice came through the comms. "Zarkari reinforcements will be here any second." Vasquez grinned. "You think I don't know that? I can smell them already." Behind them, the Warhammer moved with precision, dodging asteroids and keeping formation. They had just won a battle, but now they had to disappear. If the Zarkari caught them now, there would be no second chance. Suddenly, alarms rang through the Revenant. "Commander," Vasquez said, voice tense, "we have a problem." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" Vasquez pointed at her screen. A red signal was blinking. An enemy fleet was approaching. Fast. "The Zarkari have arrived." From the depths of space, 3 massive warships appeared. Their dark, spiked hulls gleamed under the distant stars. Their engines burned with red fire. They had arrived, and they were hungry for revenge. One of the Zarkari ships sent out a transmission. A deep, growling voice echoed through the comms. "Humans, you have made a grave mistake." Vectal, the new Zarkari fleet commander, sat in his command chair, watching the Warhammer and Revenant. His eyes burned with hatred. He would crush them. He would rip their ships apart. And he would drag their broken bodies to the Emperor's trophies. He raised his claw. Fire. The battle begins again. The Zarkari warships opened fire. Bright red plasma beams shot across space, heading straight for the human ships. The asteroid field exploded as the blasts tore through the floating rocks. Inside the Warhammer, Wolf gritted his teeth. Evasive maneuvers. Return fire. Railguns roared to life. The Revenant launched counterattacks, striking the enemy shields. But the Zarkari had come prepared. This was not a hunting mission. This was an execution. And the humans were the targets. The battle was not over. It was just getting started. The void of space lit up with fire. The Zarkari warships unleashed a storm of plasma beams and torpedoes, filling the darkness with glowing red streaks of destruction. The asteroid field around them exploded, sending debris in all directions. The Warhammer and the Revenant were in serious trouble. Inside the Warhammer, Commander Adrian Wolf gripped the armrests of his chair as the ship shook violently. A plasma blast had just grazed their shields. "Status report," he barked. "Shields at 67%. An officer shouted over the alarms. "If we take direct hits, we won't last long." Lieutenant Caldorn stood beside Wolf, his eyes locked on the main screen. The three Zarkari warships were bigger, stronger, and faster. "We can't fight them head-on," Dorn said. Wolf nodded. "Then we don't. We run." Dorn smirked. "I was hoping you'd say that." Inside the Revenant, Captain Elena Vasquez had both hands on the controls, dodging plasma fire as fast as her ship could move. "Damn it," she muttered. "These bastards are too fast." Her co-pilot, Jace Holloway, looked at the scanner. His face turned pale. "Elena, they're circling us." Vasquez glanced at her screen, and her stomach dropped. The Zarkari ships were moving like wolves, closing in from three sides. "They're trapping us," Jace said. Vasquez gritted her teeth. "Not if I can help it." She activated the comms. "Wolf, we need an escape route now." A desperate plan. On the Warhammer, Wolf quickly analyzed the battlefield. They needed an exit. Fast. He turned to his navigation officer. "What's beyond this asteroid field?" The officer checked the map. His eyes widened. "Sir, there's a nebula 5 light minutes from here. A dense radiation storm. If we enter, they'll lose track of us." Wolf didn't hesitate. "That's our way out." He opened a channel to Vasquez. "Elena, follow us. We're heading to the nebula." Vasquez cursed under her breath. "Radiation storms. You really know how to pick them, Wolf." Wolf smirked. "Would you rather stay here and die?" Vasquez rolled her eyes. "Fine. Let's move." The chase begins. The Warhammer and Revenant fired their thrusters at full speed, darting between asteroids, trying to escape the Zarkari's trap. But the Zarkari commander, Vektal, was no fool. "Do not let them escape," he roared. His ships accelerated, plasma cannons firing nonstop. They were faster, they were stronger, and they were getting closer. A fight for survival. The Revenant took a hit. Boom! A plasma blast struck its left wing. The ship shook violently. Inside, Jace yelled, "Engines are losing power." Vasquez gritted her teeth. "We're not dying here. Divert power from life support. Push the engines." Jace hesitated. "If we do that..." Vasquez slammed the console. "Just do it." Jace obeyed. The Revenant's engines roared, pushing forward with everything it had. Inside the Warhammer, Wolf watched in frustration. The Zarkari ships were still gaining. His mind raced. Think. Then, an idea, a crazy idea. He turned to Dorn. "What if we turn around?" Dorn blinked. "You want to turn and face them?" "No," Wolf said, "just for a moment. We drop a shock mine and then keep running." Dorn's eyes widened. That might actually work. Wolf activated the comms. "Elena, on my mark, turn and fire everything you have." We're dropping a mine. Vasquez grinned. Now that's more like it. The trap is set. As the Zarkari ships closed in, the Warhammer and Revenant suddenly turned. The Zarkari hesitated. Are they attacking us? One of Vektal's officers asked. Foolish, Vektal growled. Finish them. But then, boom, boom, boom. The Warhammer and Revenant fired everything. Railguns, missiles, plasma beams, straight at the Zarkari ships. The sudden counterattack caught them off guard. At the same time, the Warhammer dropped a shock mine. A second later, KRAQOM. The mine detonated, sending out a powerful electromagnetic pulse, EMP. The Zarkari ship's systems flickered. Their engines stalled for just a few seconds, but it was enough. Into the nebula. Now, go, Wolf shouted. The human ships turned and blasted forward, leaving the stunned Zarkari behind. The nebula was close, so close. The Revenant's engines barely held together, sparks flying. The Warhammer pushed to max speed, its hull groaning from the stress. And then, they vanished into the nebula. The Zarkari's frustration. Vektal watched in fury as the human ships disappeared into the radiation storm. His claws dug into the armrest of his chair. Find them. His voice was low, dangerous. Send scout ships into the nebula. I want them dead. The hunt was not over. Not yet. A moment to breathe. Inside the nebula, the Warhammer and Revenant slowed down. Inside the command deck, Wolf finally exhaled. We made it, Dorn said, still catching his breath. Vasquez's voice came through the comms. That was insane. You owe me a drink for this, Wolf. Wolf chuckled. Survive this war, and I'll buy you a whole damn bar. The battle was over. But they knew the truth. The Zarkari wouldn't stop. The real war was just beginning. The nebula was like a swirling ocean of fire and smoke. Bright blue lightning crackled in the distance. Thick radiation clouds shifted around the two human ships. The Warhammer and the Revenant floated in silence, hidden inside the storm. They had escaped, for now. But how long could they survive? Inside the Warhammer, Commander Adrian Wolf sat in his chair studying the damage reports. Shields are down to 23%, Lieutenant Cal Dorn said. Engines need repairs. Weapons are overheating. Wolf nodded. And the Revenant? Dorn sighed. They're worse. That last plasma hit almost fried their systems. If we don't fix them soon, they won't make it out of here. Wolf rubbed his temples. The escape had worked. But they were still in danger. The nebula was full of radiation storms, energy surges, and unstable gravity fields. Their ships couldn't stay here forever. And the Zarkari were hunting them. Wolf turned to his crew. Get our systems back online. We need to move before the Zarkari find us. Inside the Revenant, Captain Elena Vasquez sat on the floor of the engineering bay, her hands covered in grease. Jace Holloway was next to her, trying to repair a broken power relay. The ship's lights flickered. Sparks rained from a damaged console. We're falling apart, Jace muttered. Vasquez wiped sweat from her forehead. Tell me something I don't know. She activated the comms. Wolf, I hate to break it to you, but we're dead in the water. Engines are at 12% power. If we push too hard, we'll break apart. Wolf's voice came through. We're working on a plan. Vasquez scoffed. A plan that doesn't involve dying would be great. Jace suddenly froze. His eyes widened. Elena. He pointed at the scanner. A red blip appeared on the screen. A Zarkari scout ship. They had been found. The Zarkari hunters. Fleet Commander Vektal stood aboard his warship, watching the nebula on his display. His claws tapped the metal armrest of his chair. The humans had escaped, but not for long. His scout ships were moving through the nebula, searching. And now, one had found them. A deep growl rumbled in his throat. Lock onto their position, he ordered. Prepare to strike. He leaned forward, eyes burning with rage. This time, they will not escape. A race against time. Inside the Warhammer, alarms blared. Dorn spun around. Sir, we have a problem. Zarkari's scout ship has found us. Wolf clenched his fists. Damn it. The Zarkari scout was small but fast. If it got away, it would send their exact location to the Zarkari fleet. They would be trapped. Wolf made a quick decision. Take it down now. The Revenant strikes back. Vasquez grabbed the controls. Jace, power to weapons. We're taking that scout out before it calls for backup. Jace nodded. Weapons online. Firing in 3, 2, 1. Boom. The Revenant's railguns roared, sending a high-velocity projectile straight at the scout ship. The Zarkari pilot dodged, moving with incredible speed. It was heading deeper into the nebula, trying to escape. If it got away, they were finished. Vasquez pushed the throttle forward. We're going after it. Jace's eyes widened. Are you crazy? The ship can barely fly. Vasquez grinned. Then let's hope the Zarkari are worse pilots than me. A deadly chase. The Revenant darted through the nebula, dodging lightning and weaving through dangerous energy fields. The Zarkari scout was faster, but Vasquez was smarter. She pushed the ship to the limit, flying through a dense cloud of ionized gas. The Zarkari pilot followed. Big mistake. Jace now, she yelled. Jace pressed a button and dropped a gravity charge. A second later, KRAQ-OM. The charge detonated, creating a shockwave that hit the Zarkari ship hard. It spun out of control, crashing into an asteroid. Boom. The scout ship exploded. The Revenant shook from the blast, but Vasquez held firm. She exhaled. Target neutralized. Jace laughed. Remind me to never question your flying again. Vasquez smirked. Damn right. The war isn't over. Back on the Warhammer, Wolf and his crew watched the explosion. The scout is down, Dorn said, but more will come. Wolf nodded. That's why we need to move. Now, the humans had bought time, but the Zarkari fleet was still out there. And they wouldn't stop. Not until every human was wiped out. Wolf looked at the screen, his mind racing. They needed a plan, a way to fight back, because running wouldn't work forever. If the Zarkari wanted war, the humans would give them one. The Warhammer and Revenant drifted in the thick, glowing clouds of the nebula. Blue lightning crackled in the distance, sending waves of static across their ship's sensors. Commander Adrian Wolf stood on the bridge of the Warhammer, staring at the flickering screen. Their escape had bought them time, but not much. The Zarkari fleet was still out there, hunting them, and soon they would come. Wolf clenched his fists. We can't run forever. Lieutenant Cal Dorn nodded. Then what do we do? Wolf turned to his crew. We stop running. We fight. Inside the Revenant, Captain Elena Vasquez leaned against the damaged control panel, arms crossed. You want to fight, she said over the comms. With what, exactly? In case you forgot, both our ships are barely holding together. Wolf's voice came through, calm but firm. Elena, if we run again, they'll just keep coming. We have to hit them hard, make them think twice before chasing us. Chase Holloway, her co-pilot, looked at the scanner. Well, good news, we won't have to wait long. Vasquez narrowed her eyes. What? Jace pointed at the screen. A fleet was moving into the nebula. Zarkari warships. 4 of them. The Zarkari commander. Aboard the Zarkari flagship, Commander Vectol stared at the glowing clouds of the nebula. His fleet moved cautiously, scanning for any sign of the human ships. His scout ship was gone, destroyed. The humans had some skill, he admitted, but they were weak. And now he would end them. Find them, he growled, and burn them from the stars. A dangerous plan. Back on the Warhammer, Wolf studied the battlefield. The nebula was their only advantage. The radiation storms and energy fields could block sensors, disrupt targeting systems, and even damage ships that weren't careful. "We can use this," he said. "If we hit them fast and disappear, they won't know what's coming." Dorn frowned. "You want a hit-and-run attack against 4 warships?" Wolf nodded. "Yes, but first, we need a bait." He opened the comms. "Elena, how do you feel about pissing off the Zarkari?" Vasquez grinned. "Sounds like a normal day to me." The trap is set. The Revenant powered up and shot out of the nebula, heading straight toward the Zarkari fleet. On the enemy flagship, alarms blared. "Sir," an officer called, "one of the human ships is moving toward us." Vectal bared his teeth. "Fools, destroy them." The Zarkari ships opened fire, launching a volley of plasma torpedoes. Vasquez dodged, rolling the Revenant between the glowing energy blasts. She was fast, faster than they expected. She fired a quick burst from the railguns, hitting a Zarkari cruiser's shields. It wasn't enough to do real damage, but that wasn't the point. The Zarkari took the bait. "All ships, pursue," Vectal roared. "Crush them." Ambush. The Revenant turned and raced back into the nebula. The Zarkari chased without hesitation. They didn't realize the Warhammer was waiting. As soon as the first Zarkari ship entered the nebula, boom! The Warhammer fired a full barrage of missiles, targeting the lid ship's engines. The explosion ripped through its hull, sending debris flying. The Zarkari fleet staggered, caught off guard. Then came the next attack. Chaos in the nebula. The Revenant suddenly turned around and attacked. Railguns and torpedoes slammed into the second Zarkari ship, disabling its shields. The Warhammer fired again, finishing it off with a direct shot to the reactor. Boom! 1 Zarkari warship down. The other 3 scrambled, trying to locate their attackers in the swirling nebula. "Where are they?" a Zarkari officer shouted. The nebula's radiation storms were messing with their sensors. They couldn't see clearly. But the humans knew exactly where they were. The final strike. Wolf's eyes burned with focus. "Target the flagship," he ordered. "Fire everything we have." The Warhammer and Revenant launched their last torpedoes. They streaked through the storm, straight toward Vectal's ship. The Zarkari commander realized too late. "Evasive maneuvers," he bellowed. But it was too late. Boom! 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 The torpedoes tore through the flagship's hull, triggering a chain reaction. The massive warship exploded, sending flames and debris into the void. The aftermath. The 2 remaining Zarkari ships hesitated. Their leader was gone. Their fleet was falling apart. For the first time, they feared the humans. And then, they ran. Victory. For now. The Warhammer and Revenant floated silently in the nebula. The battle was over. Vasquez exhaled. "We actually did it." Jace grinned. "That was insane." Wolf leaned back in his chair, finally allowing himself to breathe. They had won. But this war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Wolf looked at the burning wreckage of the Zarkari ships. The humans had proven one thing today. They weren't just survivors. They were warriors. And the Zarkari would never forget it.